Good morning. My name is Tanya, and I will be your conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to the Tech in 20 call. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question during this time, simply press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. If you would like to withdraw your question, press the pound key. Thank you. I would now like to turn the call over to Mr. Morris. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Tanya. This is Roland Morris, and welcome to the Tech in 20 series. The Tech in 20 series is a quick, brief, 20-minute exposure to different technology topics that we may run across in the field and in our industry. Today's topic is from Shahn Soomro, and it's top security threats. And I'm very excited about this topic and also excited to hear Shahn talk about it. A few things about the presentation. We do have live polling, and if you're on the WebEx right now, you'll actually see a poll in the left side, and these are live polls. The way that you participate in the poll is to go to a web browser, and you can go to pollev.com/tech20. It's right there in the center part of the screen there, the address to go to. And when you pull that up in the browser, it'll update reflecting the poll that we're currently taking. As we go through, we'll have some other polls. So this is an exciting way to participate in this presentation, and it's great feedback also. The other thing I want to mention is we're going to hold the questions till the end of the presentation, and we will be glad to stay on as long as necessary to address all the questions. But let's hold the questions until the end. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shahn. And Shahn, tell us about top security threats.
Thank you, Roland, and the organizers. I appreciate you guys inviting me to talk about top security threats in general. And it's actually going to be hopefully an interesting and interactive discussion about. I love this new forum that we have. So without further ado, what we're talking about when we talk about top security threats in general, there's a dictionary definition of threats on the top left side of yours. From the IT point of view, what I define threat is an exploitable weakness in the people, process, or technology that has a material deficient impact on the availability, confidentiality, or the integrity of IT services. On the bottom left-hand side, you see my predictions, and we are going to come and visit those predictions later in and discuss a little more in detail as to what I see is going to be the common and most egregious security threats potential in the year 2013. Knowledge of current security landscape. Why should we know about the threats? The main reason for us knowing about the threats is to establish repertoire and credibility with our customers. If our customers see us as knowledgeable, as current on what's going on, what concerns them, it builds the credibility for us to pitch our services, to establish repertoire, and to be relevant to what their issues are and what they are suffering from or potential to suffer from, and give us the opportunity to discuss our solution in the same context. But one thing we have all noticed in the threat business or in the security business, I've been there in 15 years, and one of my favorite line that I start with many customers is that when I joined security, I was tall, dark, and handsome with long wavy hair, and now I'm only dark. And that has to do with the fact that security is a moving target, and as the newer technology, the rapid pace of technology introduces rapid pace of threats and their mitigation mechanisms. So how do we keep up without going crazy about constantly having to read and understand what's going on in the security landscape and stuff? I've learned something over the last 10, 15 years is that we can break it down, for me, effectively. I can break it down, understanding threat management, into two key objectives: constants and variables. So what are those constants and variables? The constants essentially are things that don't change. Those are fundamental paradigms of security against which you can understand the impact and the nature of security. I give you a few of those, and they're constantly new ones being added, but they don't change so often. They are pretty much prevalent in the security business. A simple example is the CIA, which is not the small agency out in Langley, Virginia, but the idea of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the systems. In my own work, in my experience, what I've learned is that literally the entire landscape of threat is against those three objectives. A threat is not a threat if it does not impact one of those three things. And if I want to understand if this is an issue, this is a concern for someone, I need to model it. I need to go back to the fundamentals and say, does it impact the confidentiality? Does it impact the integrity? Does it impact the availability of IT systems and services? Then it is a threat. If it's not, it's something else. It's some other kind of beast that we need to deal with. Similarly, concepts like defense in depth and good governance and the newly introduced APT are fundamental concepts and paradigms in security that we need to internalize, need to understand, and against which we can evaluate and talk intelligently about the new and emerging things called threats. And the new and variable things against the constants are things like zero-day attacks. They constantly keep changing. It won't be a zero-day attack, it's a day one. That will be too late for it. New versions of worms and malware and viruses that are introduced, the compliance requirements that's been newly minted, and the pundits and their predictions. Those are the variables that constantly keep changing. But if we go back, take any threat, any information that we are exposed to about potential risk in the IT business, we go back to the foundations, the constants. It will give us the answer as to how to either understand it or to mitigate it, and what is the impact of those threats. So I use those two models, the constants and variables. I keep my constants well-honed, internalize them, understand them very well, their implication and their impact and their efficacy, and I evaluate the variables against those constants. That's how in my career, I have dealt with the idea of threat management, risk management, and information security in general. So where do we get our variables? The constants are in our blood as a security professional. You learn them at school, you learn them in your business from the day one, you understand them. But the variables are constantly changing. Internet obviously is a huge source of getting those variable information, the flavor of day problems and stuff. And some of my favorite sites, for example, that I recommend are places like Shahn, which is the constant database of current exploits. One of my in my discussions with my peers, I realized very few people actually have run into something like CSO Online, which is a huge database of RSS feeds on virtually every imaginable topics in information security, and especially in threat mitigation. And you could connect to those RSS feeds and those blogs and find out what's happening in the threatscape currently, what's the newest and potential threat that is coming out and down the road in our world. There are also websites like Black Reading, websites, great bloggers, people like the security gurus in this space. Bruce Schneier is my favorite. So Schneier on security is one of the regular space that I go to understand what's happening in my world and what's the newest variable being introduced in the threatscape. Now, knowledge of current threat keeps us relevant, helps us in the credibility, and apply our understanding of what our solutions do to make things possible for our clients to address the issues and threats they face. I don't see my the updating of the quizzes here, Clinton.
It's going. Yeah, there'll be comments that'll flow in, so it's free-form comments, so feel free to enter it through the browser, and they'll show up on here.
Okay, so I thought the previous section should have some additional questions that we had wanted to ask, like, for example, the polling questions, but that's all right. We will continue with it. So going back to the original topic of this discussion, what I think are the 2003 key segments or key vectors of threat in our IT business. The 5 that I have selected from hundreds of lists out there that you can see online, type in top 10 threats and you can get about 10,000 hits from Google. Ones that I think are relevant to our business and that are key threats in this space are the 5 that I have listed in here. What we mean by cyber insecurity is that in an increasing interconnected world, cyber world will become the new frontier, new war frontier for not only the IT hackers and stuff, but also for social, political, and economic warfare. An extreme aspect of the cybersecurity will continue to be the protection of the national infrastructures for the nation state, as well as for the organization to protect their key information assets, especially their IP, their intellectual property, against the potential of economic espionage. And that is the most common thing that we see in what is the latest buzzword in the industry called APT, or Advanced Persistent Threat, that has an impact in the sense of a long-term, concerted, organized effort by not individuals, but mostly by organizations, even governments, to try and exploit the economic information as well as political and social information. Supply chain security is based on, if you look at the old maxim in security, you're as strong as the weakest link in the chain. Based on the weakest link theory, more organizations will fall victim to information securities at the supplier side of it as we interconnect with each other. The bank account detail that is with the payroll provider, the product plans that you share with somebody as benign as a creative agency who's going to build the ad for your next product coming in line. Your security might be terribly strong, but the chances are that creative agencies with their laissez-faire style of workspace may not have that strong a security, and you're exposing your your next generation product line to them, and somebody will get that information from that. In today's organization, data has increasingly spread across many parties. An IT function can provide inventory of data they have in-house, but you can't always control or have a visibility into where all your additional data at your supply chain, your distribution channel. And that's going to be one of the main security vector threats that will be exploited. Big data is a big buzzword nowadays. Combining a multi-source data into a single structured, unstructured source of data that can be mined for quote-unquote really important information about your market, about your consumer, and so on to use it. But from within the network enterprise, there's very little understanding of how to apply security on data structures that are just globbed together from multiple sources and stuff. And as we increase the number of data feeds into those big data sources, big data repositories, we potentially increase one place of attack where a lot of information for us as well as our adversaries can be exploited. In the mid-dash of the cloud adaptation, we also see a serious potential of risk for the organization is the lack of clearly understood and implemented security defenses in cloud are the main reason for many organizations not to go to cloud, but those who are in cloud will have to deal with that vector, where especially in the PaaS space and the infrastructure as a services space, you have to rely a lot more on the provider's capability to defend your information and defend your stuff, and that could be a major leakage point for information security. Finally, consumerization of the IT. Bring your own device, use your iPad, your iPhone, your Android phone, your A phone, Y phone, and C phone. It's a huge challenge for the organization when we start letting people use those devices. You basically share the control of your information away from strict in-house control to virtually every type of potential platform. The threat vector increases because the ability to control, our ability to exploit many arcane varieties of mediums becomes impossible for the organization. So you rely on somewhat self-fulfilling prophecies of letting the user control the flow of information, or relying on something as silly as mobile device management and stuff that has serious legal issues in terms of what is your control and what's the user's control. Those are the key vectors I see coming down the pipeline, looking into what's happening in the 2013. The main threats will concentrate in these, in my opinion, in these 5 key categories: infrastructure security, supply chain security, managing the security of big data, its collection, its feeds, security of the cloudscape, where everybody's rushing to avail the economies of scale of the cloud, but cloud is cloud secure? What's the impact of that on your data, as well as the consumerization of the IT? Those are the 5 main topics in the threatscape that we should monitor, should be cognizant of, and should advise our clients in terms of how to better apply the solutions and our services in the security. That is the bulk of my discussion. I wanted to have a more open discussion with the rest of the team about what they perceive to be the main security vectors.
Yeah. Hey, Shahn, this is great stuff, and as usual, it's always more than you originally thought, because you start thinking about security, and there's a few aspects that I could think of, but this is great. You've detailed out in a broader terms of security, not only from like a perspective of a corporation, but just security in general. So a couple of these items, well, I'm looking three items on your 2013 predictions are pretty new, the big data, cloud, and consumerization. Would you say that the level of risk is increasing over time? You know, we always have security risk and solutions, and they kind of balance each other out, but it seems like our risk actually increasing because of the new items that are available to IT groups to deploy?
That is correct. Risk increases along the ordinance of a novelty, a lack of understanding of the medium and stuff, as well as exposure. More exposure, more risk. There's a classic old line in security that securest system is the one that is not connected, buried 6 feet under the ground, and has guards sitting on top of it. Well, as we go to the other side of the spectrum, where we are more connected with systems that are not wholly owned, wholly controlled by the organization, the risk exposure increases exponentially in the same way. So we are definitely have to defend more territory, and the jurisdiction of the territory becomes a question. Bring your own device is a great idea. It reduces the inventory and gives you option to provide a more flexible workspace for the people, but how much control you have on somebody else's device, and what can you do, and how to secure data that you are transmitting to and from those devices, obviously increases our risk exposure.
Yeah. You know, and it seems like an exercise in risk management also, because as the number of options become available, like consumerization of IT, your smartphones are out there, so that's increasing risk. And at the same time, users are wanting more flexibility in how they use those devices. So it seems like they're at odds of managing that risk, because they want things simpler and easier to use. And you know, there's a comment in there about mobile apps, security exposures, and how do you know good from bad? Yep. Is there things like risk management that can be incorporated into security to say, you know, geofencing type of things, like if you're at certain locations at certain times, then these make sense of a low risk person versus high risk access?
Yeah, we will have to be more intelligent in risk management as all these new vectors, new exposures proliferate in our world. So a good thing you pointed out the location or the location issue. One of the main concerns in consumerization is the location part of the mobile device. I mean, we are sharing our location with just about everybody, and the GPS-enabled devices will increase all type of crime, not just the organization, but also the end user being subject to the crime of data theft, identity theft, information exposure, unintended and stuff, and we're already seeing it for lots of nice-looking celebrities. Nobody's hacked into my phone and stolen my pictures. Well, yeah, but that's just a manifestation of potential of exposure through the consumerization of IT. If we can get to somebody's position, we understand what they're doing and what location they are, we can use them as a piggyback into somebody else's more internal systems.
That's great, and it's fascinating stuff, and appreciate you putting time into wrapping this up into a nutshell and summarizing it for us. And it's been a great session. So we're at the 24 minutes after the hour mark. Let's go ahead and open it up, Tanya, for any questions that may be on the phone.
If you would like to ask a question, please press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. We will pause for just a moment to compile the Q&A roster.
So let's look at some of the comments here. Is password dead? I love those type of comments that we frequently see. Is SAML dead? Is REST dead? Is password dead and stuff? The fundamental ideas of security will always be there. Password is not dead, but when we talk about, and going back to that interconnected world, supply chain security and stuff, when we're talking about sharing information with third parties without immediate interactive security, which is what the username password seems to provide the end user the assurance of some level of security. That seems like the password is dead. Password will probably never be dead because password is one of the most easiest way to implement, if not security, a semblance of security. So it's a psychological part that we, in the security business, we talk about online a lot of times, that password always will be with us. Whether it's effective or not is not it's a different story altogether.
Okay. Great. Were there any questions on the line?
At this time, there are no questions.
All right.
Very thorough, Shahn.
Very thorough.
Clayton. Shahn, this is Clayton. I've got a question for you, and it really has to do with, this idea of, how much we're out there and so on. It doesn't seem like we're ever going to go back. And it's going to get more and more our lives are going to be more and more transparent on cyberspace, if you will. Do you have some quick ideas today to say, I've got 47 different websites where I've got usernames and passwords on them, and they all want to change them at different times. And how do I, just in a 20-second or whatever thing, what can I do to just protect myself today with all this?
Well, we will never go back. It's never happened that we've gone back to using 386s while 686s were available. So the nature of human evolution is we will go forward. We won't go backward. So the objective we should have is, A, is to limit exposure as much as possible. Sure, we connect to, we have all kind of social media interactions among ourselves, and we have work-related other interactions with third parties, websites and stuff where we log in and all those stuff. What anybody should, in their sense, is to don't expose something that you can't afford to expose, number one. That's always some common sense stuff. Secondly is rotation. I have close to 20, like many of us, maybe more connections or places where I log in, quote unquote, using a username and password or some other form of authentication. So how do I make sure those places are secure? My identity around those is secure. One model I have always used in past is invest into your own security. Get yourself a password vault. Some of the password vaults are literally very, very cheap open source implementations that are very solid, very good for you. you can use a password wall to automate some of the housekeeping of those passwords. Some of them actually can drive passwords and change passwords for you. Secondly is create a model, in your own mind. For example, I have a way of saying, okay, here are my email accounts. This is the type of password I'll apply on them. So when I change their password, so for example, I'll give you a hint. All my mail account passwords are based on animals. Just kidding you. Of course, don't try it. But within the animal groups, I change the groups. I'll change the names and definitions. I will use some kind of gimmicks, for example, supplying password in a different language and mixing languages and such. That keeps me aware of what my password, because if I forget my mail password, I'm going to try some animal. So it will always be an animal, and I have a set of favorite animals that I switch between, and I switch the languages and stuff. So break down, divide and conquer the security around you, but get help. In most cases, anybody who is online and has any social media and other third-party connections that are not fully secure or potentially exposing their personal information, use password vaulting or some other technology to help you with that.
Great, thanks.
Java is the last security fault. We got some Java lovers up here that says Java is the last security fault. Last security fault was about 30 minutes back. Now there's a new one out there. So that's the nature of the security problem, is that it's not, a lot of concentration goes on the new thing. But I think more important for us is to, in my experience, in my application of security, is to understand the constants, understand what is the implication of something, and work with it, and start, building blocks of security that help you keep yourself dealing with risk on the foundational level as opposed to chasing the latest of the potential problem. Google, Amazon, and others who collect tons of data from their users, will they protect it? You share your data with somebody else. You potentially share the idea that it's up to them to protect it. So I don't want to be skeptical, but I also want to say that one of the greatest blog that I ever read from Bruce Schneier had to say that don't worry about it. Actually put all your information out. So none of it is potential threat. Just monitor the use of information, not the information itself. So make sure that you frequently look into your bank account or your credit card account to see because if you try to hide, it's gone out of your hands for most part. Even if you don't know you're protecting your information or your social security number, how sure are you the guy who collected your information at the medical office or the person who wrote something down at a fair where you wanted to get a free toy out of them is protecting that data, is not sharing that data.
So, Shahn, can you pop to the next slide there and let everybody rate this, and we'll talk about what's coming up next.
Okay, good.
Thanks so much for doing this. We appreciate putting this together. There's a lot of really, really helpful information, and we appreciate the opportunity to learn more about it. It sounds to me as though we could talk about this every week because there's so much to do, and then of course it changes all the time. So thanks so much for doing that.
Thank you.
Next week we're going to have Jeff Morris, and we're talking about RESTful web services, and it's a process by which we communicate with different sites and internally with software and pull data, and so it's going to be really good, and we look forward to having you there with us next week. And so if you would, join us next week, same time, same place, and for RESTful web services. And thanks so much. This presentation will be available in the LMS late in the week and on YouTube in the Tech in 20 channel tomorrow. So look forward to, if you want to review it, go back through it again, or if you want to tell your friends about it, and anybody that might have missed it, they can come in and see it again. So thanks very much, and look forward to talking to you next week.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.